Okay, 6 o'clock, we'll call to order a meeting of the Beal Early Childhood Center Building Committee, 6 o'clock, the old Selectmen's office at Town Hall. Second item is to review the minutes of January 9th, 2018, and January 23rd, 2018, provided that members of the committee are comfortable.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made.
Second.
Seconded to approve January 9th and January 23rd. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Item 3 is review and act on the following bill schedules and warrants. PMA Consultants for professional services, $7,021.25. Lamoureux Pagano for professional services, $44,445. Warrant 1866 for $42,997.40. And warrant 1860, $52,850.10. Want to walk us through this one? Everything good?
Well, we're aware of the PMA consultants and the Lamoureux Pagano, and both of those are consistent with the contract, and we recommend approval of those. But I'm a little at loss for what the two warrants are. Those prior invoices that we've already discussed.
I could
Please.
provide some clarity though. So we have some additional bills here from Universal Environmental Consultants and CR Environmental for site work in the Allen Farm property.
Okay, so under whose contract would those have fallen? Yours, Katie?
Those were directly with.
Oh, we
Town
secured
Shrewsbury.
those. Great, wonderful. All right, as long as we understand them. Any questions?
That's not the total of those two warrants, though.
No. I'll pass these around for the building committee. There's a bill for from CR Environmental for $1,501.98. Second one for $1,524.22. And then Universal Environmental Consultants is $600.
That's the total of those bills?
That's the total of those bills for this warrant.
Under, okay, then how do we get to 42,000 and 52,000?
In addition to that, under this warrant is PMA Consultants, $13,521.20, Lamoureux Pagano Associates, $25,850, for a total of $42,997.40.
Okay, how does that dovetail with what I'm seeing on the agenda?
I think there might be some duplication listed there. So warrant number 1866, total $42,997.40. Those are the bills that I just enumerated. And then the second warrant is 1860. It totals $52,850.10. And that includes PMA Consultants for $84.05 and Lamoureux Pagano Associates $44,445.
Oh, so,
So these bills represent 2 months of service for LPA and
Yes.
PMA.
And I don't have the, maybe I can just look at the agenda. There it might be listed in a duplicative manner.
yeah, I think the
Yeah.
44,445 of Lamoureux is covered in
Yes.
warrant 1860.
Yes. So it's really requesting for this evening is the approval of the two warrants. I think we could eliminate the first two line items that are so-called line items.
Okay, then we'll accept a motion to strike the specified references to PMA Consultant for professional services and Lamoureux Pagano for professional services, $7,021.25 and $44,445 respectively. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Motion been made and seconded?
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll strike that, and now we'll move to approve warrant 1860 and 1866. We have a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. So, item 4, here reports, review, and act on the following matters. A, report from the owner's project manager.
Okay, well, the project remains on schedule and with an important submittal to the Massachusetts School Building Authority this week, and that'll be reviewed by the architect during their report. But the design efforts and the reporting to the MSBA and are all moving according to the schedule and in accordance with MSBA policies. Deb Scher will talk about the budget report.
We have the summary, budget summary, should be in front of everyone. A&E contract remains at $759,500. OPM contract remains at $242,556. Total contract value is $1,002,056. Invoices through January are $330,110. So the balance to finish to get to the 1.2 million is $869,890. The total amount submitted to ProPay, submitted to the MSBA, is $237,458, and total reimbursements to Shrewsbury, the last one paid, I believe it was 2/9, is $119,110, and if you do the math, the 119 is 50.16% of the 237. So no costs have been identified as ineligible, and that's the way, that's right, because they're all eligible, so. And there's currently no outstanding ProPay reimbursements pending.
Great, questions of the committee? No further comments?
Okay, now, we do.
Thank you.
One other item on the OPM's report, at the last meeting, I was given a homework assignment, and I had proud to report the dog did not eat my homework. I have it here.
Good. Okay, as I recall, this was the question raised by many of us over the reasoning and basis for the assumption of a 5% escalation cost on an annual basis. Mr. Masiello, who's out there every day in the marketplace, questioned, he's seeing 3-ish. So several of us thought it would just make, I think there was a consensus of the group, that it made some sense to ask you to go back and rejigger the project costs in such a way as 3% and 4% were also shown. As we try to get a real number, right now we're grasping at steam to some extent, but if it were 3%, what would the adjustment in a likely project cost be? So, thank you.
And so the first page is 11 by 17. That's what we reviewed, and it shows the projection of October 2017 actual bid results expressed in dollars per square foot, and those escalated at a 5% annual escalation rate to the probable to a January 2020 bid date. And so that yielded a range of potential values of $462 a square foot to $486 a square foot. And the second sheet we haven't seen before is some calculations to show alternative escalation rate assumptions, and it's just pure mathematics. So what I have here on this top of the sheet is the dollars per square foot, the starting point of $414 a square foot as a low on the left-hand column, and the high of $435 a square foot. And each of those values I've done a what-if scenario and escalated at a 5%, a 3% annual rate, a 3.5, a 4.0, a 4.5, and a 5.0. So on the right-hand side, that 5.0, those two values highlighted at $485 a square foot and $462. That's what we have on that 11 by 17 page. That was the 5% amount we saw. So as you move leftward from 5% all the way down to 3%, you see, if we were fortunate enough to see 3% escalation rather than, an assumption of 5%, that $485 per square foot value would be $465 per square foot instead. And so naturally, that whole sequence of values gradually increases from low to the high point. Now, to put things in perspective, now these dollars per square foot in each of these cells is multiplied by the square foot of the building, 142,800 square feet. So now we can think, instead of thinking in terms of dollars per square foot, we can think of construction bid price for a project. So now, if we take the 3% and say at the high end, we have a $66 million, $66.4 million, or $63.2 million for high and lows at the 3% value. And naturally, as we go towards the right and assume higher and higher escalation rates, we have as high as $69,325 and $560. So the 69.3 would be the high, and that's the highlighted value in the middle of the spreadsheet on the right-hand side. And then diagonally opposite on the low end at 3% is $63,184,700. $755. So we can see a spread of, based upon various assumptions of low escalation rates and high escalation rates of anywhere between 63.2 million to 69.3 million.
Construction.
Construction costs, yes.
So now then there's factoring to get to a project cost.
Right. So a rough rule of thumb at this point, you would multiply these by 1.25 to get to a total project cost. Because typically on these MSBA school projects, the total project cost is split roughly 80% construction bid price and 20%, they call it soft cost, but it includes design fee, OPM fee, it includes furniture, fixture, and equipment, and IT that outfits the school building after it's built, and moving expenses, and legal expenses, other things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions on that?
Questions? Anyone on the board on that? So if we take the sheet provided last week in the last meeting from the during the architect's presentation, take either of these times 1.25, we'll get a possible
Total
different
project cost.
projected project cost.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, sure.
just a quick question. So the bottom section, Paul, with the additional 4.5%?
Yeah, now that was, and I don't have that other graph, but what I showed, so this is taking a bid, the actual bids in October 2017. So these are bid prices that we have in the left-hand column. And, but we saw some data I shared last week from the MSBA's website. The budgets that estimators provide owners before the bids typically are 4.5% higher, because the estimators don't like to have their clients have the bids come in above the estimate, so they have a little bit of a bias. So these are what we would expect for construction bids. So we would expect the estimators to be recommending something on average 4.5% higher, just because that's their nature to be a little bit cautious and try to protect the interests of the owner.
Understood. Thank you.
I thought I understood. Now I'm not so sure I do. Can you help me? Construction budget bottom chunk that Joe was just referring to, I believe. So if I look at a 3%, it's 69,377,319. Okay, you see that one right here?
At the very bottom, okay, yeah.
So you're telling me that's 1.045 higher than what?
So yes.
The 66,389?
Right, so every cell here, every one of these 2, 4, 6, 8, there's 10 cells.
Yeah.
All those 10 cells get multiplied by 1.045 to yield down here. Similarly, up top, all those 10 square foot values get multiplied by 142,000 to
Gotcha.
yield the
Okay.
10 values there.
Great. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I had the
Yeah.
right block to block. Any questions? Thoughts, comments? Mr. Masiello?
No, not at this point, thank you.
All right, anybody else? Well, thank you very much. I think that gives us a better sense of what could be as opposed to what we're...
Yeah, and then as I mentioned the last time, it's impossible to predict the future. As we get closer, we're going to hopefully have less time to have to make this guess. We won't be going from October 2017 to the bid date, but I think it's the estimators tend to be on the cautious side and advocate to owners' budget for 5% escalation, and hopefully you don't have to incur that. Now, as I mentioned last time, a contractor I talked to said he understood, he wasn't alarmed by the 5% that the professional estimators were recommending, but he might go to 4% and in a pinch go to 3.5%. And we've seen 3.5% previously, but that cost trend from the MSBA, if we look back on that 11 by 17 sheet on the top, that flat, it's a relatively gradual increase as time goes on, but we've had some recent, we don't know where it's going to go. There's a little bit of an uptick into fiscal year 2017. Does that flatten out again or not? So it's a matter of aversion to risk, and we just can't predict the future.
Yep. All right, thank you. We'll now move on to the construction manager at risk presentation and
Do you want to have the
discussion.
architect report first? You have that CM at risk at the bottom.
I was just so excited to get to this.
Okay, that's
Do you
fine.
mind, Katie? Yeah, I hope I didn't slight you.
Okay.
Go, Paul.
Very good, okay. Well, as a reminder, I've passed out the, what I provided as homework assignments. I have a 10-page summary of CM at risk, and I don't intend to read through all 10 pages of this, but I thought if anybody had, after I introduce this topic and talk about some of the highlights on this document, if anybody has read this and has some particular questions, we can turn to the particular page and discuss it in detail. But I'll just kind of talk a little bit. A lot of people at this table have some experience in construction, and other, some more than others. But we have the public listening as well. So I just thought I'd take a moment to try to put this into a little bit of perspective. The traditional manner of procuring construction and building construction for public entities has been what we call design, bid, build, and because it happens in that sequence. You have a full design. You put that full design out to the marketplace for general contractors to bid on it, and after the bid, that lump sum bid is awarded to the general contractor, the work is built. And that's been a traditional method for a long time, and over time, these general contractors have, because of the various trades of electrical, mechanical, HVAC, plumbing, there's been a lot of specialization, so these general contractors over time have done less and less work with their own forces, and more of it has become subcontracted. But still, many GCs, general contractors, still perform their own site work, their own concrete work and masonry work, but they'll still sub out a large amount of the specialty work. With this kind of trend towards a high degree of specialization and a high percentage of the general contractors contract being sub to second-tier subcontractors, some owners, construction owners, wanted to thought, why don't I cut out the middleman? And so we had something developed called construction management, where a construction management consultant would put the bid scopes, working together with the architect, would put the various scopes of work out to bid, and the owner initially would hold all those contracts. And that was how the World Trade Center in New York was built. That was one of the first examples of what they called agency CM. But as I think that didn't take, in public construction, the owners still wanted, and even private construction, the owners liked the idea of having the general contractor responsible for the whole price. So we call it, what we call construction management at risk, is where all those contracts are held by the general contractor, or what we call now the construction manager at risk. That's how we went from construction manager to construction manager at risk. But the construction manager at risk is it's open books accounting, and they provide guaranteed maximum price to the owner, and so there's many allowances and contingencies built into that guaranteed maximum price. So some people would argue that the term construction manager at risk, there's not a lot of risk involved, where they put a lot of allowances in there, however, in having the open books accounting. But we call it construction management at risk because still that single firm is holding all the subcontracts, and they're liable for the performance of all those subcontractors, as opposed to the agency construction management, where the owner is holding those subcontracts. So they are at risk to a degree, but at risk to a lesser degree than the traditional design bid build, where the general contractor bids a single lump sum and is liable for all the work. He may have allowances in his bid, but we don't see those. We just see the lump sum bid, whereas with the construction manager at risk method, there's open books accounting. And
under what circumstances would one find the manager at risk to be more appropriate or more likely successful than the long-standing option?
the construction management risk method is and it's only been available in Massachusetts for public entities since the 2004 construction reform legislation. But for many years before that, privately held entities would do it. The hospitals and universities in Boston for many years have been doing it before it became available to public. But it's so they've liked it as a method even for a long time because it's a little bit different way of doing business. The general contracting over time in some industries had become a rough and tumble thing with a lot of hard-nosed and difficult firms, and some of these universities and hospitals and other entities who had the ability before 2004 to use this method chose it because it was just a different way of doing business. The contractors were less litigious and less prone to be looking for change orders because their work, their performance on the next job depends upon references from the previous job. But whereas particularly comes in handy is in a lot of the pharmaceutical companies like to use CM at risk because they like to get their plants into production because there's only so much time before a particular drug they're manufacturing can go generic. So they'll start building the foundations before all the different machines and all the different structural steel are even designed. So they can't, to get the job and the work done faster, they can't wait for the full design to be completed because that costs precious months of production time. So those types of fast track and schedule sensitive projects where you want to start the design, start some construction before the full design is complete, those are well suited to the construction management at risk method because you don't have to wait for the whole design to be complete.
We don't have that situation here, do we?
We don't have it here, but we see some school projects, depending upon the timing, and once it'll be later on when we know what site we're going to be selecting. Still, if the timing of some particular school project were that, okay, the bid would be likely, a contract would be awarded maybe in October, well, that contractor, okay, you've just awarded a contract in October for him, but he's going to have a winter shutdown period. Once that frost sets in, he can't do much excavation over that whole winter. So if you're facing that kind of timing, a municipality might say, well, let's do CM at risk, so at least, okay, the design won't be ready for the full design won't be ready to put out the bid maybe till October. But the architect can release some early site packages, and so maybe in July the contractor could start to do excavation and maybe put in the footings before the freeze sets in the winter, and also and before that full bid would happen, you could possibly even start your steel fabrication, so that could happen over the winter. So when the winter breaks,
You're off and
you
running.
go right into construction. You need people will swing steel in the winter as well, as long as the foundations are in.
Often when something like the words "at risk" are in a title, there's a cost associated because somebody's taking a risk.
Yes.
Is this generally a less or more expensive option in terms of cost to the total project than the traditional method?
It is more expensive than the traditional method, and like we said, it's worth the extra cost to some industries where they need it faster, and for some particular projects who feel that extra head start before ideally, if you can bid at the Sherwood Middle School, we were lucky. It was just ready to bid in maybe I think we bid it in the subcontract in December or January. So by the time we had the contract awarded, the contract was getting ready. It was right around simultaneously. They mobilized on site in March when things were thawing out. So that we hit the timing there where we didn't really need to do early packages.
I wasn't involved, and I don't recall off the top of my head. Sherwood was done under a at-risk model, correct?
Yes.
And why was that? Was that the coordination of getting a building done at a certain time so that we could then demo the old Sherwood? What was the reasoning there? Do you recall? You were involved.
Yeah, because we talked about the pros and cons, and the last sheet of that handout was the pros and cons. Yep. And I think first of all, it wasn't as difficult of a site as many sites are, but still we were building a new building within 10 feet of the existing school building. So we wanted to be able to I think select a contractor who could be a little more trusted with when you do design, bid, build. You have to pre-qualify all the general contractors, but the state requirements, you can still have, every now and again, have a less than desirable contractor slip in. So the idea was to be able to select your own contractor based upon qualifications, knowing that the school was going to be built within the nearest part of the school was 10 feet away from the new school was 10 feet away from the existing school, and the idea that always for those 18 to 20 months of construction, there was always an occupied school while that building was going from the ground up. So I believe that was one reason, and I think the other reason, I heard some discussion about, there had been some tough luck on some previous school contracts in town where the general contractor, the roll of the dice, you didn't get the best general contractor, you had maybe a litigious one that went out of business one time, and I think there was a fresh thought was, let's try that different approach now that's available.
Is there generally a lump sum cost associated with that higher number, or is it a percentage of the project cost? How does one arrive at that premium?
Yeah, so when one of the things is, it's open books accounting, so that extra cost and comes from a number of different sources.
Is it a percentage? Is it $12? What?
Well, okay, the professional estimator, A.M. Fogarty, who did the estimate for the BDP, he's estimating roughly 8%. It costs about 8% more in his mind, and from his experience, to do it with CM at risk as opposed to design, bid, build.
8% of project cost or construction cost?
Construction cost. The construction cost will
So-
cost 8% more.
Okay, just construction.
Yeah.
This doesn't
Yeah.
ripple through to the project.
Right,
cost.
so, yeah, so we probably have roughly the same soft cost. It wouldn't change, it wouldn't really change there. So we're talking about construction bid prices. So so in their minds, and we've seen reports of ranging anywhere from 5 to 10%, and maybe the 10% end comes in the Boston area where there's a more competitive market. But so the source of this extra cost are a number of, you can find out where it comes from because it's open books accounting. He shows you all his subcontract bids. And, okay, just to take one step back.
Let me ask you something now.
What's that?
Just because you're bidding under something, why would the number be higher? Windows are windows, whether sold under one model or another.
Okay, so I'll tell you that, and there's two different types of classifications of subcontractors. What we have, one classification is called filed subbid subcontractors in Massachusetts. So those, whether you use the design bid model or the construction management risk model, those are all competitively bid, publicly open before the general, so with the general contractor, those are all put forward, and the general contractor will typically go with the low bidders. With construction management at risk, the CM is required to go with the low bid for whether it's mechanical, the HVAC, plumbing, those types of things, electrical. Those will, with CM at risk, they take the low bidder. So there's no particular premium you see for that classification of subcontractors. The other classification of subcontractors is not regulated that way, where they have to submit their bids separately. So under the traditional design bid method, you don't see those bids for half of the contractors, the structural steel contractors, the concrete contractors, the site work, and reinforcing steel contractors, and those are not filed sub-bids, and so you don't see those, but those are still competitively bid. The general contractor solicits quotes, but you just don't. That doesn't happen in public, but those are competitively bid. But the general contractor does that without the transparency, and those are competitive numbers also. What happens though with this, sometimes with construction management risk, a general contractor is competing on wasn't selected based upon qualifications, so he has to have his lump sum price be the lowest price to get the job. He can, if he's off by $100,000, and the next bidder gets it. So so it's in the general contractor's interest to generate as much competition as he can for that non-filed sub-bid classification. Okay. Now the CM at risk contractor, he's been selected, and some CM at risk contractors, they still competitively bid those same classifications of subcontract work, the structural steel, the concrete, the site work. But sometimes they have a smaller pool of subcontractors they pick from, because they don't, they might pick their they might pick the site contractors from a pool of 3 that they've come to work with. And if you're picking from a pool of 3, you have those 3 competitively bid versus 5 or 6 site subcontractors, or 5 or 6 steel subcontractors competing in the design bid build approach versus maybe a smaller group of subcontractors, so tends to be a higher pricing on that second set of subcontracts. Now,
Let
one
me
of
ask you a
these-
question.
Yeah.
Simple question.
Yeah.
Your homework you did, thank you.
Yeah,
So I should look at your yellowed 69,325,560, right? And if we went with one option, add 8%. Correct, incorrect?
okay, which-
Middle, just pick one, pick a number. Right, the 69, this end. If I'm understanding what
Yeah,
you're saying,
yeah.
this is a construction cost and
Yeah.
estimate and then a function of
Right.
inflation rates.
yeah, so,
But if I'm hearing you correctly, I take that 69,325,560, and if we go down one path, we add 8%.
that's what the estimator would say, yes.
Yes, I realize that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
just want to make
But
sure.
I think, a
John?
lot of these projects that we've used for sampling are a blend of CM at risk and
Right.
competitive bid.
If you go back,
So you might not be adding 8% to
So
it.
it's slightly skewed.
yeah, so what I did here actually was, when you look at that 8.5 by 11, the bottom two, I took two design bid build contracts, and that was $414 a square foot average. And above that were two CM at risk ones, and they averaged $435 per square foot. So I guess my low are design bid build, and my two high ones that I picked were CM at risk.
Yeah.
So I guess we would, to answer you, to give a better answer to your question, the low one you could multiply by 1.08.
Yeah.
Because that's a premium that the estimators will estimate. Now, with that said, not all CM at risk firms limit their competition. Some are willing to open the bidding up to a wider array of subcontractors. And we had good success with the Shrewsbury Public Library project. The CM at risk that was selected there was a firm called Fontaine Brothers out of Springfield. And they're a unique firm because they do construction management at risk approach as well as design bid build. So they have a bigger pool of subcontractors than a lot of other CM at risk who don't work in both markets.
But if we look at the library, we
Yeah.
wanted to save critical chunks of architecture, right? So forget your 10 feet away example with Sherwood, you're up
You're
against the
right
brick.
next to it. You're right next to
If
it.
we look at both of these sites, one, I think we understand the geotechnical, correct me if I'm wrong, about Glavin. Pretend we do, for this exercise. So it's a demo exercise, mopping that up, and then you're building a building. You're basically out in a big chunk of relatively flat land. South Street, once the geotech is done, you know your footprint. You go in, scrape off whatever loom there is, and you build up. I'm not seeing a particularly complex project at either of those two locations. Am I missing something?
The only thing you would, you're right, it's not particularly complex, and those simple projects, particularly where you can go into an open site, more often than not, you'll see those projects, especially in the school market, public school market, those would be more likely done with the traditional design bid build, which is called Mass General Law, Chapter 149. And the only benefit to building that CM at risk, with the CM at risk model and paying that premium, and I'm gonna talk, it's not always 8%,
Yeah.
but I'll talk about that in a minute. But whatever premium it is, you might say you don't want to do it unless it was still a schedule-sensitive one,
Yeah.
or maybe you just don't feel like rolling the dice and you want to pick the contractor you want instead of having to roll. Usually you roll the dice and you get the low bidder and everything goes well, but sometimes that low bidder made a mistake and he's $2 million under and he wants to make up that everything's a fight all the way through because he's bound to.
But that's why we've hired you. There'll be no fights.
No, we just do the fights for you.
Exactly. Patrick?
Just one comment and then a question. So one comment would be that the Mass School Building Authority published a memo in November of 2016. They did a 5-year study on CM at risk versus design bid build projects. There were 115 projects. During that time period, 57% or 66 of them were design bid build. The remainder, 43% or 49 projects were CM at risk. And I think, I mean, you might know the history better, but when the MSBA was formed, they wanted to change and elevate the quality of public school construction, and so they provided one additional reimbursement point for communities that selected the CM at risk procurement method to incentivize people to step into these new waters and try this method out. And during that time period, as I said, it's 57 to 43%. So, depending on the projects, many communities have taken it up. But it's no longer necessary for MSBA to try to incentivize communities to try this procurement method. So this memorandum in November 2016 also recommended elimination of that reimbursement point. We received an additional reimbursement point on the Sherwood project because we chose the CM at risk method then, but for this project, for Beal project, it is no longer available. So it was more of an incentive back then.
It took a little bit of the curse off of that premium.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was my comment. And then my question would be, or just for clarity, I think that there's this terminology that gets used around a guaranteed maximum price.
Yes.
When you choose the CM at risk method. It might lead one to believe that there is no project contingency or need for a contingency or change orders. But can you talk to that, how?
Right. Okay, so yes.
That there still are change
Right,
orders and.
Right. And the guaranteed maximum price that the CM at risk, that's negotiated with the owner, with the OPM's help. But that's a fixed price at the start of construction. Now that CM at risk contractor, just like any other general contractor, he has to build this job for this guaranteed maximum price, no more than that. The same way a design bid build contractor, if he bids the job for $67 million, he's obligated to build that for that lump sum price. If you want to add work to either one of those two firms building your work, if you want to change from linoleum flooring to some porcelain tile,
Yep.
he's going to legitimately request, and you will legitimately grant a change, because one flooring is more expensive than the other, so he would get a change to the contract. Anytime the only time you won't have a change in the contract is if you never adjust anything, and there's never anything that was maybe not considered.
So owner-directed change orders are additional costs.
Those are additional costs. Now, what we found,
It's
though.
guaranteed to the extent you don't change anything,
Right.
right? But as soon as you
No
start
latent
changing
lead,
up.
no
latent
suitable
conditions.
soils.
Right.
Exactly.
Conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's guaranteed, but not quite guaranteed.
Right, the owner, yeah. Within the construction budget, one of the soft cost items, though, is owner's construction contingency. So that, you go into a building project, and generally, for a new build on a fresh site, and we did this for Sherwood Middle School, we assume 5% of the construction costs was set aside for change orders, because there's never been a building constructed without a change order. Even some of us have done simple renovations in our home, there's always some extras. So you budget for that. So within that soft cost, we talk about 80% of the total project cost is a construction contract, 20% is soft cost. One of those soft cost items is owner's construction contingency to allow for the anticipated change orders. So typically on a new build construction project, with the design bid build method, you would allow a 5%. Now the Shrewsbury Public Library, because it was an addition renovation, we allowed 8% because that's more complex. But what we also find, though, is that the construction management at risk is together with a very complete design. You can do better than that 5% budget. And on both the Sherwood Middle School and the Shrewsbury Public Library, on the Sherwood Middle School, we budgeted 5%, and we only spent 3% on change orders.
Good.
On the Shrewsbury Public Library, we allowed 8% for change orders and only saw a little less than 4%. So
Good. Any questions from the committee?
Just one.
Yes,
I'd
Bob?
like to hear from the architect, their experience with the two methods and different contractors, different jobs. I think that might be valuable.
We have done significant work really with both design bid build and CM at risk, many of them here in the town of Shrewsbury. The biggest advantage from our perspective of CM at risk, aside from all of the comments that PMA has already made, is the communication with the CM at risk. When you partnered with a particular firm rather than coming in as a low bidder. And we worked with PMA on Sherwood, so I imagine that you were backing up on this, Paul, in that it's just the level of the communication and the issues that go outside of the team is much minimized compared to a lot of design bid build. So our experience was Oak Middle, which was design bid build and went through 3 contractors, a bonding company, a fire, a variety of other incidents that really were challenging. Lunch was served on the front lawn, out of boxes, just you about name it, it happened. And then
And that was with a contractor who the town had some
there
prior
was
success with.
absolutely, Mr. Massey.
No, the initial contractor, we didn't,
We did.
we've never dealt with them.
The first,
Well, and then they brought
when we
in,
got to the
Jackson.
third,
yeah,
second
who
one.
were, once upon a time, an excellent contractor.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's, I think from our perspective, that's a big advantage. I think projects like this, in terms of the community's resource to support issues that come up on a project, the time is dear and the issues are dear. What we find is if you have a very qualified CM at risk contractor, we work on a professional level and we work it out and feel it's a fair way. That said, design bid build, our experience is the biggest issue is a very solid pre-qualification process. And we have become well versed in that in terms of there are a certain number of issues that are articulated in the proposals of these contractors, and there is weight to certain elements. And so we work with that carefully to be sure what we feel are the most salient points are weighted most heavily in the pre-qualification process. And through this, we've had a good experience in terms of going through that. But at the end of the day, it's opening those bids, and that's the contractor that you're going to have for the next several years on your public project, whether it's off-site or on-site or with kids on-site, all of the issues that are around it. How do you value that? How do you value the difference in that? That I think is the question for you all to consider. I know I'm speaking with you as a team, PMA, are prepared to do whatever you want to do, what you feel is the best route to go. We'll set you up as well as we can.
When do you need a decision on which route?
Okay, but I think by June 1st, but I'll go into that in 1 second. One of the other sources of extra cost is the CM at risk firm generally staffs his job with more supervisors. The Sherwood Middle School, the CM at risk firm at peak construction had 4.5 full-time equivalents on site controlling all the subs. Down 8 miles down the road, Deb Scher was working on a design bid build contract. At best, they had 2 people on site supervising the subs, so it was a much more controlled job.
Great point, but if Marciello looks at it and says, we should really have another 2, we could take money from the contingency with the traditional model and tell them fund 2 more, right? So if we thought they were not providing cover and on a 142,000 square foot building, we
How would you
arrived.
justify that when they owe you that service of a well-built building?
No,
in
good
the end
point,
of the day?
good point.
Because we do put into the contract, we put in the contract bid documents now, at least a minimum of 2 full-time superintendents on site to at least get the minimum coverage you need, to make sure they don't try to do it with one guy and another guy on the phone 40 miles away.
But in that bid, could we not put 4 if we thought 4 were?
You could, yeah.
You
A
can,
competitive bid?
it's,
Yeah.
I don't believe you can do that.
Well, we were able to stipulate two supers, but
No,
the
okay,
risk is.
we got time on that.
Yeah, well, we have some more time to discuss that, but I just would like to take 1 more minute to talk about the premium, because the estimator will say, 5 or 8% extra premium, and that's almost a no-brainer. You don't want to pay 8% more for anything if you don't have to. But I will say, because of the open books accounting, on the Shrewsbury Public Library project, built into that guaranteed maximum price, the CM had his own contingency of 4.5%, or $750,000 of this nearly $17 million GMP. But that, because of the open books accounting, that only is drawn upon if needed. That full $750,000 was returned to the owner at the end of the project, as were some other allowances. So the sticker price if it's sticker price of a CM at risk job at the time of the GMP may be 5 or even 8% higher, but if you get back 4 or 5% at the end, then the net result might only be a 3 or 4%. So I think if you find the CM firms that do both design, bid, build, and CM at risk, and have a bigger pool of subs to pick from, you have opportunity, and considering that they have a track record of returning contingencies and allowances, you might only realistically get a 3 or 4% premium rather than that 8% the estimators do up front. But as I've mentioned, the estimators are cautious. They're gonna assume the worst case scenario, that you have that CM from Boston who only lets 2 steel subs bid or 3 steel subs bid. And when we've seen other places, CM's more willing to open up the competition. So that would be one caveat where you can do this for less than that 8% premium. You might be on the order of 3 or 4% premium.
Further questions?
Having worked on both methods, some of the larger construction managers I have worked for are very skilled at chewing up the whole budget
Of course.
because they are based as a percentage of the construction cost.
And so some of them will, those contingencies and allowance, they'll try to find every way they can to use them up as you go. But that CM's contingency, drawing from those funds and with this transparency have to be approved case by case basis. But we just didn't need them on the Shrewsbury Public Library project. But getting back to your question, I have an 11/17 schedule, and the blue activities in the bottom is the CM. We have to apply to the Office of Inspector General to get permission for the town of Shrewsbury to use it. But I think, so I won't go through all these activities, you can read them yourself, but I have here award CM at risk contract on September 12th, 2019. And my thinking behind this is that because your schematic design finishes on September 12th, 2019, and the next time, 2018, I'm sorry, 2018, okay, thank you. Yeah. So if we award a contract by September 2018, then that would mean we have that construction manager under contract when design development starts, because design development can start as early as when the schematic design finishes. And this is when one of the advantages of CM at risk is you have a contractor who's going to build the work, reviewing the design documents to see if they're constructible, and finding, you have a professional contractor who does this work for a living. He's reviewing and preparing estimates and the earliest documents, may find some savings opportunities, and so those types of value he adds. So I have here an assumption we could hire the CM at risk firm on September of 2019, and working backwards, we would probably want to decide. We probably will want to decide on CM at risk roughly around, to make that happen, to hire him in September and to do all the advertising. We want to make a decision by June of 2018. We want to make it yet go or no go. We would do the application in advance, starting in maybe March or April, just to make sure we had the ability to do that. But the town's decision should be no later than June.
Well, unless anybody has any further questions this evening, just one second, John. When we wrap this up, I'd like to just put it as a reminder item, Paul, in case people have other questions between now and our meeting in March, which I think is March 13th. John?
When does the debt exclusion go
Next year, at the November election.
And we're gonna be awarding the CM at risk privately?
These things, no, these don't quite mesh up.
No,
so.
you would.
This is internally.
You would have, it's a two-phase process. You hire the CM at risk for pre-construction services only. And that's when he's reviewing the design, doing design development. The guaranteed maximum price won't happen until the completion of design, and all the subs did on the job. So you actually, the first assignment for the CM and risk firm, you can hire him. You don't have to wait. You could wait till after you have town meeting and maybe in November, town election in November of 2018. You could wait till after that as well. I just was wanting to give the earliest you would want to hire him would be at the start of design development. You could wait till after, but he would be only hired for construction, pre-construction services. If the project was abandoned,
Right, they're done.
he's over, he's dismissed.
But we can't award contracts without that money
That an appropriation.
appropriated.
All right, well, thank you very much. As I said, we'll do our homework, and if you have any further follow-up, we can do it on the
Yeah, we'll be happy.
meeting in March.
Yeah, and we could have, there are often people who want to have a CM firm come in to talk and give their view of things. I'm sure there's some that will come in to give a presentation as well. You won't just be hearing it from your architect and your OPM, although there'll be a sales aspect to it, but still, we have two trusted CM firms that have done successfully performed projects. I would imagine either of them would be willing to, as well as any number of other firms might be willing to give a presentation.
Thank you. Report from the architect.
Good evening. Thanks for having us again. Happy to report that we are in the final steps of pulling together the PDP submission. We're printing and correlating it today. There's a few final items that we're getting certified and approved minutes from tonight will also be incorporated, and we're going to be sending that off to MSBA tomorrow.
Great.
In the mail. The other thing you just want to kind of touch upon, the next time we're getting together, Monday the 26th of this month, 7 to 9, for the Sustainable Design Charrette. That Sustainable Design Charrette is going to be facilitated by our Sustainable Design Engineer, the Green Engineer. They have facilitated many of these events in numerous other communities. And we'll also have all of our major consultants on hand to assist with any particular questions, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So.
Are we in this room?
We are, yes.
Okay. Thank you. 7 and 9.
Correct.
Great. Anything else?
Regarding we're about to embark on the preferred solution report phase of our project, so we just want to give you a quick thumbnail on that. We have a very aggressive schedule, 3 months for this, so it is to go to MSBA. This is part of we're locked into an MSBA submission for this one, so if we miss it, then we're out a couple of months, and we're targeting the May 9th submission to MSBA. So we do have a couple of meetings that are typically scheduled, as you said, March 13th, April 10th, and then because of the estimating process, excuse me, we are anticipating we might want to schedule like a special building committee meeting so that we're on target for the votes for the preferred solution.
When do you want that?
We're looking at late April or early May. Some of that we may want to take a pulse on this the next meeting that we have, if that's acceptable for you.
Sure, fine.
In the meantime, what we see as the biggest part of our work during the preferred solution report is bringing forward all of the information that you need to make a decision between these 2 sites. And toward that end, we are expecting to receive some additional reports from the services that you have already authorized, including what we call desktop, traffic, and geotechnical, 21E, and wetlands information as well. We may want to expand that depending on what we see in those reports. It may bring forward other more exploratory work that we would recommend to have done so that we can better compare these 2 sites. Examples of that might be the borings at Allen Farm. We do want to wait just to see what we get in these reports, if we get adequate information.
So do you need a stutter step meeting from us? Should we get together at 6:30 on the 26th? What should we do to expedite this? Because that's where I'm feeling really exposed right now, is,
That would work.
as far as I'm
That would
concerned, we
work.
should be out there as soon as you can responsibly do it.
Yeah.
Doing your geotech, getting the traffic done ASAP, because sooner than later, we're gonna be sitting here being asked, pick a horse. And without geotech, I'm not
Agreed.
comfortable. Without traffic, I'm not comfortable. The rest of it, I think, is relatively been fleshed out, no?
Yeah, traffic is another one,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Excellent suggestion. I think that
So
would be
6:30 on
great
that, we'll
if
meet.
everybody-
People comfortable with that? Can people make the 26th, yeah? Okay, great.
And
Good, then we'll do that.
that's really all we have.
Okay, now you sent us a nice report about the site. Do you want to talk about that, or are we just working
We
along?
did get additional work done on Allen Farm, and basically what it confirms, to summarize, is the parameters that we were working within for our site development are solid at this point, so we're in a good place. as
So
far as-
regarding environmental permit, local jurisdiction of state, but no Army Corps.
As long as we stay out of the wetlands, and that's what we wanted to be sure we understood what the
Yeah, good.
parameters of that meant, so, that was an excellent additional step to take.
Okay, so we square?
We are starting in our office to look more closely at the program and those sites, to see how we can develop them and to what extent we can meet the program more closely than we were able to do in the PDP. Exciting times.
Great, good. Anything else?
No.
Questions, comments? So we'll get together on the 26th at 6:30, run through these matters. If
Perfect.
something becomes critical, though, call us. We've got 48 hours to wrap together.
Very good.
All right, thank you very much. Otherwise, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.